When George Lucas came up with the idea of Star Wars in the mid-1970s, setting an adventure of this scope in outer space had never been done before. So how did he get the film to look so good when there were no visual effects companies up to the challenge at the time? He started his own. Industrial Light and Magic was formed to handle the special effects in Star Wars, and they're still revolutionizing the industry with their work. Let's peek behind the scenes at what Star Wars movies look like before they work their magic. A New Hope. The original trilogy is known for its use of practical effects, but in truth, those films relied on visual trickery just as much as their successors. Sprawling CGI backgrounds were not an option when the first Star Wars movie was being made. So the effects artists at ILM came up with some ingenious alternatives. Matte glass paintings were painstakingly created by hand and then added to scenes later, but a different technique was needed to bring the movie's many spaceships to life. Former ILM frontman John Dykstra told Den of Geek, "Back in the days of Star Wars, we kind of walked into an empty warehouse and sat on the floor and went, 'How are we going to do this?' The producers, Gary Kurtz of Fox and George Lucas, took an incredible risk by listening to what myself and my collaborators had to say with regard to how to do this, because we were inventing this stuff from scratch." When it came to Han Solo's Millennium Falcon, Dykstra decided to create a model and film it in front of a blue screen using an early computer-controlled camera, which allowed his team to add all of the outer space details in post. The Empire Strikes Back. Dykstra and his team won an Oscar for their revolutionary work on Star Wars, but Lucas chose not to bring Dykstra along when he moved his base of operations to San Francisco. It was here that ILM got to work on the next movie. But despite the success of the first film, budget restraints were still a problem when it came to making The Empire Strikes Back. As VFX supervisor Richard Edlund later pointed out, computer graphics were extremely expensive, very slow, and the resolution was always a problem. Luckily for Edlund and Lucas, the team they'd assembled proved more than capable of delivering results within their means. The film's cinematographer Mark Virgo compared this era in cinematic history to the lunar program, referring to the period as an amazing cooperative of artists, imagination, optics, engineering, and homebrewed software. Return of the Jedi. By the time 1983's Return of the Jedi went into production, the ILM crew had found their groove. Master of Puppets Phil Tippett was brought in to head up the creature shop that ultimately created the Ewoks, and the rest of the effects work was divided between Richard Edlund, Ken Ralston, and Dennis Muren. Among the jobs that fell to Muren was the speeder bike chase, one of the hardest sequences in the film with 100 total effect shots. Muren explained, "Because the bikes were going to be blue screen, the backgrounds didn't require that many different shots to do, because we could use them over and over again. I got the idea to do it with a Steadicam. I called Garrett Brown up, who invented it, and he flew out from back east and we did a test out in Samuel Taylor Park out here with him just walking along with the camera, shooting 1 frame a second. And the thing worked. Muller and Brown spent several days in the woods, just filming trees from different angles, then matched the footage up when they went back to the studio to film the actors in front of the blue screens." The Phantom Menace. George Lucas's long-awaited return to the Star Wars universe didn't fail financially, but it did let down a number of fans, who were quick to turn on new CGI character Jar Jar Binks. Despite the overwhelmingly negative reaction to the character, Ahmed Best, the man who played the Gungan, is proud of the fact that he broke new ground with Jar Jar. He explained, "One of the biggest reasons I took it was because of the challenge of it. It hadn't been done before. There was no Andy Serkis in Gollum, no Na'vi from Avatar. I was working with George to pioneer this new character form of acting and storytelling." Unlike Best, the actor who played Darth Maul only has fond memories of The Phantom Menace, his first experience on a movie set. Martial artist and actor Ray Park was initially only brought in to film some test footage, but Lucas liked his work so much that he decided to cast him as the Sith Lord. Park's primary fighting style is wushu, but he also practiced gymnastics and ballet in preparation for his big fight scene with Obi-Wan Kenobi and Qui-Gon Jinn. Once the choreography was worked out, the scene was filmed in front of a custom blue set and handed off to ILM, just one of the many sequences they were required to complete. Attack of the Clones. The ongoing advances in CGI meant that Lucas could set stories in parts of his galaxy that were previously inaccessible, which he took full advantage of in Attack of the Clones. He explained, That was the fun part of writing the project. I wasn't limited. Whatever my imagination could come up with, I would just put down on the page and say, we'll worry about this later. Animation director Rob Coleman was initially under the impression that some of the cityscapes and backgrounds Lucas required for Episode 2 were going to have some practical elements, but he soon learned this wasn't the case. Of the 2,000 effect shots in Attack of the Clones, around half include completely computer-generated characters. A team of 60 animators worked alongside 340 ILM artists and technicians to render some of the most well-known Star Wars faces in CGI, including a certain little green Jedi Master. Rob Coleman explained, "The biggest technical challenge for me was animating Yoda. That was due to Frank Oz having created that character in The Empire Strikes Back as a puppet. This time Yoda is much more active and prominent. He actually runs and has a lightsaber battle." Yoda's duel with Count Dooku was one of the film's big visual effects set pieces, but it required some human input from Christopher Lee, who was one of the many cast members forced to work with blue screens for long periods of time. Revenge of the Sith. According to Ian McDiarmid, who played Chief Palpatine, the use of green screen was really ramped up for the third and final film in the Lucas prequel trilogy, which had the most effect shots yet. He told The Telegraph, "So much of the filming took place in front of a green screen. I used to feel great sympathy for Ewan and Hayden because they had so much fighting to do and quite often had to fight imagined enemies. George often hadn't decided on the details of the film, so Ewan and Hayden didn't know if they were filming an ironic moment or whether they were about to die." Episode 3 also introduced us to General Grievous, the lightsaber-wielding cyborg who held the title of Supreme Commander of the Droid Army during the Clone Wars. Upon receiving the design for the character, animation director Rob Coleman knew ILM were going to have a tough job breathing life into this one. He explained, "Since his movement was so restricted, we decided to have him talk with his hands, because although there is a grill pattern where his mouth should be, there are no articulating bits for his mouth. No lip sync or facial expressions, no brow to move, no indication of what he is feeling or thinking." Grievous wasn't the only villain without eyebrows in this movie. It's in Episode 3 that we get to see Anakin Skywalker become Darth Vader after he's badly burned in a battle with Obi-Wan, a scene which had its own effects challenges. Hayden Christensen wasn't originally going to be the person in the iconic suit, but in the end, he convinced Lucas to let him play the part.
I begged and pleaded, and they were nice enough to build a Darth Vader suit that actually fit me.
The Force Awakens. After working with J.J. Abrams on his Star Trek reboot, visual effects supervisor Roger Guyett joined the director going into The Force Awakens, and the pair's partnership proved as fruitful as ever. Episode 7 made over $2 billion globally, while Guyett and his team were nominated for an Academy Award for their work, much of which incorporated practical effects. In particular, real models were often used for the little BB-8 droid. Guyett told Art of VFX, "From the beginning, we knew we wanted BB-8 to be as practical as possible, so that the actors could interact with him, and of course JJ could direct him on set. Removing the puppeteers from shots later on proved tricky, but Guyett had nothing but praise for them. Despite all the effort that went into making BB-8 real, there were still a number of scenes in which the character had to be rendered digitally out of necessity. Around a third of all shots, in fact.
Obviously, some of the characters couldn't just be done physically, and in those occasions, JJ was more than happy to push the digital technology of fully digital actors.
For all the practical work, Guyett estimates that The Force Awakens contains around 2,100 effect shots. Rogue One, a Star Wars story. The first Star Wars spin-off went in a new direction in terms of both narrative and style, and most critics were impressed with the result. One of the major talking points was the digital resurrection of Peter Cushing as Grand Moff Tarkin, whose character was portrayed by Guy Henry via motion capture. VFX supervisor John Knoll was able to track down a cast of Cushing's face made for the 1984 movie Top Secret, which gave them a huge head start when it came to recreating the late actor's likeness. The process took a whopping 18 months to complete and was done with the permission of Cushing's estate. Of course, Tarkin wasn't the only CG character in Rogue One. To create the droid K2SO, the filmmakers fitted Alan Tudyk with a motion capture suit and then digitally added the robot's body later. To get Tudyk's face at the appropriate level for the towering robot, they took two different approaches. In some scenes, Tudyk wore stilts while he interacted with the other actors. If the shot was too dangerous to use stilts, he wore a backpack with a paper cutout of K2's head positioned several feet above his own. Now that's dedication.
There's no way to respect this, you know?
The Last Jedi. J.J. Abrams spoke at length about using as many practical effects as possible in The Force Awakens in order to recreate the feeling of the original trilogy. And his successor Rian Johnson adopted the same attitude when he took the reins for The Last Jedi. Neil Scanlon returned to head up the creature shop, and this time they were tasked with creating a new breed of animal called a Vulptex, a fox-like inhabitant of the planet Crate. Scanlon told Entertainment Weekly, "The idea is that these wonderful sort of feral creatures had lived on this planet and had consumed the planet's surface, and as such had become crystalline. To get an idea of how such a creature might move, they fitted a small dog with a suit adorned with drinking straws. The next step was creating an animatronic puppet that the cast could interact with in scenes, but much like the BB-8 build, it wasn't possible to use it 100% of the time. Static models complete with 25,000 individual crystals were built for the benefit of the VFX team, who were able to scan them and render the creatures however Johnson wanted." Thanks for watching. Click the looper icon to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Plus, check out all this cool stuff we know you'll love too.